What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next, we are going to go over some of the big books, the cool books that are coming up in this week's Heritage Signature Auction. Stay tuned because there are some pretty interesting books to talk about. All right, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So this week, we've got the big signature or platinum heritage auction coming up. And there's always really cool books in these. These are the big books, the expensive books, the ones that go for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, one of the things I noticed, and actually Mickey over on Swaggle Comics, he had commented on this as well, was that this one seemed to be missing some of like the really big stuff, like the things that are going to be touching $500,000, $1 million, that kind of thing. There are still some big books in here, but nothing that really like hits that level. So what I thought I'd do with this is I went through all the listings and I picked out the ones that really caught my eye. So these aren't necessarily the big signature books. A couple of them are. And so these are the ones that really caught my attention. Some that are really unique, some that I just think are, fun books to see come up for sale. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over each of these books. I've got 12 books on here, as well as one that I would probably be a little cautious about, and I'll talk about that too. And I'm going to go over each of the books, go to GPA, so that's what I use to price a lot of the books that I look at, and see what I think these books are going to sell for. So let's get into these. The first one here is, of course, Amazing Fantasy 15. And now part of the reason I picked this one out is that, yeah, we do see Amazing Fantasy 15s in all of these big auctions, and you see them in the weekly heritage auctions as well. But this one, the reason it caught my attention was that this is the highest grade one that's in this auction, and it's not that high of a grade. I mean, a 6.0 is an expensive book. It's a big book. Don't get me wrong. It's already sitting at $56,400. But a lot of times in these big signature auctions, we'll see 8.0s, 8.5s, that kind of thing. These books that'll hit hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even I think we had a 9.2 or something like that in one of the earlier ones this year. But, a 6.0, it's not something that's really hitting that big signature number. And I mean, it's not the best looking 6.0. It's a decent looking 6.0. Colors are great. It does have this crease right on the front cover. So it really, it looks like a 6.0. It's not one where the flaw is limited to the spine or the flaws are on the back. And what I'm talking about here is it's got this corner crease up here. And so this is, it's a traditional 6.0. That's really what you expect. But it's a really expensive book. And so, you kind of try to hope to look for the ones that are going to present as nice as possible for the grade. But let's go over to GPA, and we've got Amazing Fantasy 15 pulled up here. And if we go down to a 6.0, you can see that one just sold in September of this year for $75,000. So if we take a look at what the 6.0s have been doing, we can look at this trend for this. And when you look at this trend that's been going since around 2013, you can see that $75,000 mark is right in line with what you would expect a 6.0 to be at now. You can see these spikes that happened during the comic boom, and then it's been retreating back to that trend line. And so 75,000 is around where you might expect this one to go. Let's take a look at what that $75,000 copy looked like. And so you can see here, this was that $75,000 6.0. Same page quality, off-white, but this one doesn't have any big limiting flaws that are on the front cover. I don't know exactly what the flaws are with this one. Maybe there's something going on in the back. Maybe there's some splitting or something like that. But this one does look better for the grade. This presents above a 6.0 in my opinion. Whereas this book here presents like a 6.0. If we kind of just flip back and forth, this one's a little brighter, doesn't have that flaw. And so if I'm looking at the pricing for this book, even though I think $75,000 is kind of in line for a 6.0, I wouldn't be surprised if this one goes a little bit lower, somewhere in the $65,000 to $70,000 range, probably a little closer to 65. But let's take a look at what other grades have been going. We have a 5.5 hasn't sold for almost a year, so we can't really use that number. 5.0 for $43,000 in the middle of the summer. So I think somewhere around 65,000 is probably where this book will settle, this Amazing Fantasy 15. Now let's move on to the next one. This one this might be the most expensive comic that goes in this auction. I think that this one has a very good chance at being the most expensive comic in this auction. And so this is one of the big premiere books. So I said, I didn't pick all the big premiere books, but I did pick a couple that really caught my attention. And this one specifically, All-Star Comics number 8, the first appearance of Wonder Woman, is because it was an 8-0. You do not see the 8-0 very often. You see a fair number of kind of the 2-0 to 4-0 type books. You see some 6-5 books, but an 8-0 is a very nice copy. And that's represented in the price it's sitting at already. It's sitting at $105,000. And really, I've had people ask this before. You don't need to pay too much attention to these numbers before it hits the live sales, before it gets the live bidding. I've seen these numbers triple, quadruple when you go into lives. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that everything's going cheap or anything like that, but it does mean, you watch it and you get to see, what that book is ultimately going to go for. But let's take a look at All-Star number 8 and see what we think an 8-0 might go for. Because, I mean, this is one of the premier Golden Age books. If she was on the cover, if Wonder Woman was on the cover, it would be a much bigger deal, but still. I mean, we've got a 7-0 that went about a year ago, a little over a year ago, for $168,000. We had this 6-0 or 6-5 that went for 60. We had a 6-0 that went for 66. I remember one of these was like a brittle page book. It went a lot lower than I was expecting. It was either the 6-0 or the 6-5. But I also think that this 7-0 maybe went a little high. I mean, when we look at what all these other books have done, we've got a 3-0 going for 31,000, a 4-5 going for 43, a 6-0 for 66, 6-5 for 60. It's going around 10,000 a point. Now, maybe you get, kind of a big gap up around the 7-0, but going 2.5 times for half a grade seems a little unlikely to me. So I think this was probably just a little bit too big of a number that was paid. And there's no other history for that one, but for an 8-0, I mean, we had in 2015 an 8-0 sell for 200,000. I mean, that's 8 years ago. This was probably right around peak Wonder Woman. I don't remember exactly when that the first Wonder Woman movie came out, but that definitely had an impact on the prices of these books. But I could see this 8-0 maybe going for something around this 7-0 price, somewhere in the 160 to 175,000. That's where I could see this 8-0 going. I wouldn't be surprised if it went lower than what this one went for. But I think 160 to 175,000 is a pretty reasonable price point where I think this one might end up. But we'll see. I mean, it is obviously it's not a book that comes up for sale very often in these types of grades. We did have this 9.4 that sold for over $1 million last summer, but otherwise we haven't had an 8.0 for 8 years. 7.5 hasn't sold for 17 years. 8.5 for 11 years. So these books and these grades do not come up for sale, and so you could have someone that definitely wants to put out the money to get it. So that's always a caveat, especially with these books that sell very rarely. I'm trying to make an estimate here, but you get a couple people that really want an auction and they can blow these numbers out of the water. But next one here, this is actually probably one of the books I'm most interested in seeing come up for sale, just because I see a lot of the other number ones come up fairly regularly. You see a Batman one quite a bit. You see a Superman one quite a bit. You see Captain America Comics number 1. You don't see Action one very often. Action one's another one's pretty rare, but you don't see Marvel Comics number 1 come up very often. This is also the October copy. I believe there's October copies, and then there's something where they basically covered this and made it a November copy. And so the October copies often get a little bit of a premium as well. Now, this is a restored book. It's a CBCS book. We can take it's got the new label. I talked about that in that video that I did over on Fanalytics channel. So it's a restored, moderate to extensive amateur. It's got a moderate amount of pieces added to the cover and first strap reinforced, tear seals to cover and first strap, and the cover is cleaned. So this book should not be able to get back to a blue label, even if you wanted it to, a CGC blue label, because largely I believe that cover cleaning is going to hold you back from that. But it's a decent looking copy. Now, this isn't my favorite cover. I don't really care for the art itself, but I really like the color scheme. It's one of these books that always grabs my attention with this blue and kind of the orange color scheme. But this is obviously going to be one that's a little trickier to price because it's a restored book. Marvel Comics #1 does not come up for sale all that often, and it's in a CBCS case. Is that going to have any impact on the price? So if we take a look at restored books, let me go down here to we had a CGC C3, and so this moderate to extensive would probably be equivalent to a C4, but we had a CGC C3 that sold in 2021 for $156,000. Less than a year ago, we had a 2.5 Universal go for $193,000. I mean, just a coverless went for $40,000 in January of 2022. But you can see this one, there's not a lot of sales. This book doesn't sell very often. We had a 3.0 go for $223,000, a 4.5 go for $360,000, but a lot of these sales are over a year ago. And so there's not a lot to go on here. But I think this book, about half is probably reasonable. That's the rule of thumb in lower grades. It tends to be a smaller percentage when you get higher up. I could see it going around 150,000. It's currently sitting at 81,000. I wouldn't be surprised if this about doubles by the time it's sold. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's in a CBCS case, but you really care that much, just take it out and have it put into a CGC case. I mean, it's an extremely rare book. You see how rarely this book ever comes up for sale. And so are you really going to pass up on your chance to get this copy because it's in a CBCS case? I mean, I think that this book is a pretty solid $150,000 book. We'll see what it ultimately ends up going for, if that case ends up, hurting it some. But I think 150,000 is a pretty reasonable number for this Marvel Comics #1. I'd love to own a copy of this someday, but I mean, when a 2.5 restored is going for $150,000, or that's my estimate of what it would go for, I think it's outside my budget. All right, now the next one here. This is a cool book. If you followed my channel, you know I've owned, I think, 3 copies of this book, maybe 4. I think 3 copies of this book. I had a pretty nice copy that was on my keeper list that ended up selling or trading earlier this year. But this is an exceptional copy. This is the nicest copy that is out there. It is the Bethlehem pedigree, Astonishing 30. This just incredible, like, eyeballs melting this guy on the cover. And the story on the inside is the same. At least the first story. It's this story about these eyeballs that have these tentacles that come out of the ocean, and they end up kind of like attacking this town, and they're looking for more like bodies in the ground to take their eyeballs and that kind of stuff. It's really messed up. But a 9.2 is an absurd grade for this book. I don't think it's ever sold in this grade, but let's check. So we've got Astonishing #30. And you see it's a Marvel or Atlas Comics at that time. And yeah, the highest grade that's ever sold publicly, or at least it's been tracked on GPA, is an 8.0. And we had a 5.5 that went for $5,700 just in September of this year, a 5.0 that went for $5,000. I mean, down in these grades, it's kind of like $1,000 a point book. But I mean, when we take a look at the census, like I said, this is the only copy in a 9.2. The next closest is an 8.5. There's no 9.0. So this is the single highest graded copy of this book. And I mean, let's just take a look at this thing. I mean, it is in incredible condition. You can tell it's got a little tanning, but this cover hides nothing. I mean, it's so much black on this cover. If there are flaws, they're going to be there. And you can see there's a little bit of spine wear, but that's really about it. I mean, this is a really exceptional copy, and it's a pedigree. This pedigree label looks really good. I like how the pedigree labels look, these gold labels with black covers. And let's see what what do they say for the graders notes? Just because they don't have any grade. Oh, because this one's okay. So this book was graded 23 years ago. So I'm not surprised there weren't graders notes, and it must have been in one of those old CGC labels, and they got it regraded. Or not regraded, reslabbed to get it in this new slab. Oh, and it's got that cool date stamp on the back too. So let's see, does it have the Bethlehem stamp? Yeah, it does. So if you're not familiar with the Bethlehem pedigree, they all have this stamp, or almost all of them, if not all of them, have this stamp on the back for Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. But what do I think this book will go for? I mean, this is one of those that's pretty tough. I think 25 to 30,000 is not outside the realm of possibility. And it's one of those where I wouldn't be surprised if it went for more. I mean, you can see there, it's never come up for sale. The 8.5 has never come up for sale. The 8.0 only came up 4 years ago. So there's going to be a bidding war for this book. I can just about guarantee it. And right now it's sitting at 11,100. There's no way it stays there. I'll buy it. I'll buy it at that price. I would have no hesitation buying this book at that price. And so I can guarantee you this book is going to go for quite a bit more than that. And I think 25 to 30, I wouldn't be surprised. And I really wouldn't be surprised if it went for more than that, but I'll rough estimate, 25 to 30,000. But yeah, I think this could go for some pretty big numbers. It's not a book that I think would ever hit like 100,000 or something, but even if it hit 50, I wouldn't be shocked. But yeah, this will be a cool book to see come up for sale. All right, next one. This is another one that I was really surprised to see. This is probably the nicest copy of this book that I have ever seen. This is Batman number 121, first appearance of Mr. Freeze or Mr. Zero at this time. And it's a white pages copy, and this thing is incredible. Like if you know this book, if you've seen this book before, you know that it is extremely difficult to get this book outside of like a 4 or a 5. It accelerates in price very quickly once you start getting into the 6s and the 7s, and a 9.2 is insane. Let's see, there are 3 and a 9.2, and there's just one higher. And I remember I looked at this book maybe a month ago when it first popped up as coming up for sale, and I was trying to rough estimate what I thought it might sell for, because this is another one of those that you don't see this grade come up for sale ever. And so you can see a 9.2, last time one sold 2009, 14 years ago, and a 9.4 sold 5 years ago for 80,000. So the way I was trying to kind of like rough out what this might go for was looking at what other grades sold for back in 2009 and what they sell for today. And so if we look at like I haven't checked yet, so I don't know if I can find one here. So a 6.0, you can see a 6.0 was selling for around $425 back in 2009. And today it's going for 4,000. So it's selling for about 10x what it did back in 2009. That would make this around a $70,000 comic book. And let's take a look at another grade. Let's say I don't know if the 8.5 has had enough sales. Let's look. Nope, not enough sales for the 8.5. What about a 9.0? 9.0 in 2008 sold for $2,600. So we'll say it was about a $2,600 book. 2022, 28,000. Again, about 10x, 10 or 11x. So again, around 70,000. Let's pick one more. Let's try like a little bit lower grade, a 3.5. So a 3.5 back in 2008 was a $150 book, maybe a $200 book by that point. And now it's around a $2,000 book. And so again, 10x, 12x. So I think 70,000 is pretty reasonable as an estimate for what this might go for, especially with how exceptional this book looks. It's one of those that I wouldn't be surprised if it went lower, just because I don't know how much, like what the demand is out there for this copy, but I'm going to say 70,000. I think that based on all the other grades, how they've moved in the last, 14 years or so, I think 70,000 is a pretty safe estimate for what this book might achieve. And yeah, it's like this type of book. It's like when it hasn't sold for 14 years, it can be difficult to know for sure. But I could see $70,000 happening for this one. And it's at 31,200 right now, and doubling or a little more than doubling once you hit the live auction is not at all unheard of. It's actually pretty common. All right, the next one here. I know Mickey did talk about this book some in his video as well. This book, I remember, I think I saw Heritage or the Heritage Comics grader on Instagram post this book, and when I saw it, I was shocked. This is an incredible copy. I think this is tied top of census. Yeah, there's 3 and a 9.0. I believe one of them is a Promise Collection copy. There's none higher. This one looks nicer than the Promise Collection copy. Well, it has different things about it. This one has this kind of like this flaw in the upper right corner where it's almost like a little bit of like color fade or something happened there. The Promise Collection copy doesn't have that, but this one is brighter. And so that's what I mean by it looks nicer. Like it's got the same similar type of condition, you know, it's a 9.0 book, but the Promise collection doesn't have that, but this one is definitely brighter. And so we've got Captain America Comics number 27. And this is an Alex Schomburg cover, and it's one of his best. I don't know if I would say it's necessarily his best from the Captain America run, or his best cover. I mean, one of probably my favorite Captain America cover is probably USA 7, but this one's close. I would love to own this book, but this book is also well outside of what I think for my budget. I think it's well outside what I could ever afford. And the reason is, you can see the 9.0 Promise collection copy, which I wouldn't be surprised if that one came up for sale again today, if it would go for more. I think looking back, 45,600, even though that's a ton of money, was a great deal for that book. And if we take a look at that one, I can kind of show you what I'm talking about with the appearance. And so we've got, here we go. We've got this is the Promise collection pedigree. I mean, it's still an incredible looking copy. Actually has a little bit better wrap as well. It's not showing any of the white from the back, but you can see this one, this 9.0 has this little bit of kind of like fade up in the corner, but the Promise collection copy, which is a cream to off-white pages copy, you can just you can see it's just a little bit more yellow to the cover. It's not even yellow. You'd call it more like off-white compared to this one. I mean, you can see just a little bit difference in brightness, but they're both incredible copies. And I wouldn't be shocked if this book sells for as much or more. So I think $45,000 to $50,000 is a very likely possibility for this book. And I mean, this one went for 45,600 2 years ago. I do really think that it would sell for more if it came up again today. That's one of the things I've seen with the Promise collection books. Like the keys tend to now sell for more. The ones where it was like high grade filler, those are the ones that are selling for a lot less, that are dropping by 30, 40%. And it's just, there's not a huge demand for like a 9.8 random action comics or a 9.8 random detective comics. But when you've got the highest graded copy of one of the top, like a top tier Schomburg Captain America cover, that's going to be something that a lot of people want to get their hands on. And this one, I mean, it's a white pages copy too. You know, you've got that white page thing, like that's going to set this one apart. And so I think 45 to 50,000, because it's not the pedigree. Pedigrees do hold some value as well, but I think 45 to 50,000 for this book is very reasonable. All right, next one here. We got Black Cat Mystery Comics number 50. This is one of the most well-known covers from the golden age for pre-code horror. It's a Lee Elias cover. 6.5 is a very nice grade. So let's take a look at that one. This is a book that has gotten way more expensive. These big key pre-code horror comics have gotten quite a bit more expensive over the last couple of years. There's just a lot of demand for them, and there's not a ton of copies out there. I mean, on the census for this one, you've got 105 universal copies, 115 total. And I guarantee you there are a lot more than 105 people that would like to own a copy of Black Cat Comics number 50. Now, for me, it's a little too gruesome for me. You know, like this one and the Tomb of Terror 15, like they're just a little bit too gruesome for me. I can appreciate them. I can appreciate that these are the types of books that really got into the media and caused the Senate hearings and the Seduction of the Innocent book and or report and all of that. You know, I mean, this is the type of thing that it's just like these were on newsstands being sold to kids, and it got into people's minds, and it resulted in the Comics Code Authority being established. So they're very historically significant books, but it's still it's a little gross. So, but let's look at a 6.5. So there aren't a lot of copies of this that come up for sale because, yeah, there are 105, 105 universals out there, but a lot of people want to keep them. You know, when you get copies of some of these books, you just don't want to sell them because you see they only come up for sale a few times a year. And if you sell yours, you might not be able to get it. And maybe the one that comes up for sale is an 8.5 or a 9.0, and it goes for 20 or 30,000, and your budget is 5,000 or 10,000. And so you've got to wait for that 3.0 to come up for sale, or the 2.5, or, you know, something like that. But this one is a 6.5. This is going to be a pretty expensive book. We had an 8.5 sell a year ago for 27,000. We had a 9.0 file copy sell for 33,000. So this is around a $3,000 a point book up at this type of grade. You had a 7.0 go for 18,000. That would go for, I think, more today. I think 18,000 for a, let's see. So this is a 6.5. I think 18,000 seems low. And that's just a feeling. Like if I was just pricing this out, I would say it would probably go for 18 or 19,000. But this is one where I wouldn't be surprised if this one goes for more like 25. And I think there's just going to be, this is going to be one of the hot books of the auction. I think, you know, a lot of people are going to want to get this one. This is a nice grade. I wouldn't be surprised if this one goes for 25. So if I was doing kind of like normal pricing, I would put it at 19. But I think it's going to go for more than that. This is going to be one of those that it's going to be an upside surprise, but I'm not going to be shocked if it does. So I'm going to say 19,000, but I think it easily has the potential to hit about 25,000. All right, next one. One of my favorite covers of the Golden Age. This is Famous Funnies number 214. This is a Frank Frazetta cover. This is an exceptional copy. It's this bright red planet sci-fi cover. I really like this one. And this one even looks like, I mean, this is rare for this book. Almost every copy of this book has a printer crease, like right here. Even high grade copies have this printer crease right here. And I don't see it on this copy. So yeah, because doesn't look like a printer crease. So this is an exceptional copy. It doesn't even have that printer crease, which is rare. I've seen it on just about, I know I've had 3 copies, I think, of this book. All of them have had it. I've had the opportunity to see some other copies as well, even some higher grade ones, and they've all had it. And so this is pretty rare for a copy to not have that printer crease. So this is an exceptional copy, off white to white pages. Let's see what this one might go for, because this book has gotten much more, all the Famous Funnies books have gotten much more expensive as well over the last couple of years. There's just a lot of demand for these Frank Frazetta covers because there aren't a lot of them that he did in the Golden Age. So an 8.5. We had an 8.0 sell in January of this year for 14,400. That looks like a heritage number. Let's see if that one had that. Interested to see if that one had this printer crease on it. That is a nice looking copy too. Yeah, this one doesn't have it either. So yeah, this 8.0 didn't have that printer crease either. But what do we think this 8.5 would go for? It's a little bit older label. Do I think it could get a grade bump? Yeah, I mean, it's got spine wear. I think it's an 8.5. I mean, I don't really see, and it's got a little bit of corner wear there. This isn't a book that I see as being like one that has the potential to upgrade, but it's just a really nice copy. It's got a little bit of corner wear. It's got a little bit of spine wear, that kind of stuff. But an 8.5, I think, I mean, man, 2018, it's crazy how much more expensive this book has gotten. I would put it at 16,000. I think 16,000, because we've had 2 sales now in an 8.0 that have been up around this $14,000 number. And so I think that's really helped cement this value. You also had, I mean, a 5.0 going for 8,100 earlier this year, 3.5 for 3,840. I think 16,000 for this 8.5 is a pretty reasonable estimate. So that's where I'm going to put this one. I think 16,000 for this 8.5. All right. Next one, we're actually jumping into the Bronze Age for this one. I know it's pretty rare for me, but this is one of my favorite covers of all time. This is Green Lantern, number 76, Neil Adams cover, considered one of the books that kicked off the Golden Age, or kicked off the Bronze Age. And this is an insane grade, a 9.6. I think there was one that came up earlier this year or last year in this grade, but this book is exceptionally rare in the grades above the 9s. I talked about this in another video as well, where you can see how the prices jump on this book. And it's because, I mean, there's 2,165 copies out there, but as you get up above the 9s, you drop so quickly in what's out there. I mean, only 298s, 26 96s, 45 94s, 89 92s. And this is one of the top, 28 copies in existence. Yeah, top 28 copies in existence. So what would this book go for? And we do have, like I said, we have a relatively recent comparable. There was a 9.6 that sold in June for 18,600. Looks like we had a $20,400 sale back in 2022. This is one of those books that it didn't really spike in the comic boom. I mean, you did have it was, I mean, its record was from 2009. I mean, it was a $30,000 sale back in 2009. So it's gone down. I mean, look at these prices in the 2016. That was a great deal. Went down to $7,000 and then started climbing its way back up. And so I think it'll sell for around that same price. I think 18 to 19,000. I'll say 18,500 is where I think this book will sell. It's a white pages copy too. I mean, it's so exceptionally rare. I mean, let's take a close look at it, see if there's anything, maybe that jumps out. But yeah, I mean, it's just such an exceptionally rare book in this grade that I think it'll match that type of price. I think this could be an $18,500 book. Now it has come up for sale a few times up here over the last couple of years, but yeah, I'm going to say 18,500 for this one. It's got a lot of work to do. This is one that, it's sitting down at 7,500 right now. So it does need to get quite a few bids to get up to that 18,500 number, but I think that's possible. All right. Next one here, got Detective Comics number 73. Now, the reason I picked this one is one, because I love this cover. It is the only cover appearance of the Scarecrow in the Golden Age. He has his first appearance in World's Finest number 3. But this is, where you get that cover appearance. And this is actually a pretty nice grade. There have been quite a few copies that have sold in the kind of like the 3.0 to 5.0 range, but a 7.0 is an exceptional grade for this book. So let's take a look at this one. So we've got Detective Comics number 73 and a 7.0. I don't even know how long it's been since one has sold. So a 7.0 hasn't sold for 4 years. 4 years ago, went for 15,755. And here are these books in this 5.0, 6.0, 3.0 range where we've had a number of sales over the last year or two. And you can see it's going around $2,000 a point. We have a 3.0 going for 6,000, a 5.5 going for 10,500, 6.0 going for 12,000, around $2,000 a point. But when you start getting to where the books are more rare, where they don't come up for sale as often, you can see the 7.5, it was going for around $4,000 a point. This is probably a little bit high of a sale. I think that was high, but I wouldn't be surprised if this book, this 7.0, goes for $3,000 a point. I think 21,000 is a very reasonable number for that 3.0. And again, it's one that wouldn't really surprise me if it went for more. I mean, it's already sitting at 15,500, but this is an old label. This is when people talk about old label CGC. This is an old label, but you can see this one has a color breaking crease up here. So there might not be much, at least it looks like one. Can't tell for sure, but it looks like one. So there might not be much you can do to get out of a 7.0. You could still get above a 7.0 with that. That's probably only about maybe a half an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch. There's a little tear here. Yeah, I mean, a 7.0 is probably, even though it's in the old label, and I say that sometimes, like, they're in the old label still at this point. Yeah, okay, and you can see this looks like a pretty long crease here. I don't know for sure. That could be on the case, but a pretty long little crease here. So I wouldn't crack this book out. like I feel like if you crack this book out, you might get a 6.5. I don't think you get a 6. You might get a 6.5. So I wouldn't crack this book out, and that's probably why it hasn't been cracked out for 23 years. So in my opinion, I'd keep this book in this case, or just have it reslabbed maybe, but don't get it I wouldn't get it regraded. But yeah, I think 21,000 is a very reasonable expectation for this book. It's a great looking book. It does have the flaws though that make me think if you risked resubmitting it, you might get a 6.5. All right. Now, next book here. This was another one that really caught my attention. This is Eerie Comics number 1. If you're not familiar with this book, it is credited as being the first horror comic book, where it was basically the entire interior was horror stories. And an 8.0 is, again, an exceptional copy. And this one looks really, really nice. It looks really clean. There's not really anything that jumps out on this book. I mean, look at the edges, the corners. I don't know if there's anything in the center that really jumps out. I mean, this is an exceptional copy. And yeah, so the Grader's Notes, very small light stain, top left, left top of, and they didn't fill it in, so cover probably, very light multiple stain, left top of back cover. So staining is the thing that is holding this book back, and they must be pretty light because, I mean, maybe there's some little things in here. You can usually see that stuff better if it's in the light, and so it kind of hides itself in these types of images. But yeah, I mean, an exceptional copy of that book. But what would an 8.0 go for? I had a, what was it, a 2.5 I sold earlier this year. But man, an 8.0, that would be a cool book to own. So an 8.0 sold 2 years ago for $14,400. And I'm going to say it would sell for a lot more than that today. I think that number would definitely hold up. I mean, yeah, look at this. A 6.5 sold a year ago for $14,400. Then down in the lower grades, we've got a 3.0 for $3,700, 2.0 for $2,600. But we're talking about an 8.0 here. We're talking about a very nice high grade copy of this book. We had a 9.2, the Promise Collection copy, sell for $108,000. And this is one of those examples I had from before where it first sold for 90 and then it came back up again, sold for 108. When you're talking about the keys, and this is one of those keys, they are selling for more the second time they come around. And but this one, 8.0, I think this could go for 20. I think that this book, and it's sitting at 8,004 right now, 8,400 right now. This is a really nice looking book. I think 20 is not outside reason, and I wouldn't be surprised if it went for more than that. I'm going to say 20, but I wouldn't be surprised if it went for somewhere between 20 and 25. And it's very possible that this big Promise Collection sale, this 9.2, that might help move this book even more, because it's not that far off. I mean, 8.0 to a 9.2 is not that far off. But yeah, I think 20,000 is where I'm going to put my estimate. Man, I'm even second guessing myself while I'm filming this here, because I'm going to say 20,000, but I think 25 is pretty likely. So I'll say 20,000. I think 25 is pretty likely. All right. Now the last book, and then I'm going to talk about one that I'm going to say you might want to be a little cautious about. And this is this Ghost Comics number 6. This isn't the one you should be cautious about. This is an incredible copy. I believe this is also top of census. I think it's tied with 3 others. So this one is tied with 3 others. This is my favorite cover of the run. It just seems so well done. I like a lot of the covers in Ghost Comics run. If you're not familiar with Ghost Comics, I believe all the covers, or almost all the covers, were done by Maurice Whitman. They're all basically like a good girl art, pre-code horror combination. It's similar to Planet Comics, where it's sci-fi and good girl art. Ghost Comics is pre-code horror. And this one just has so much great detail on it. You got this creepy face. Sometimes maybe people don't notice it, but you got this creepy face kind of hiding in the shadows in the background. You got the woman in the red dress. You've got the Kool-Aid man, the guy popping through, to save the day, this creepy hunchback looking guy. But a 9.0 white pages. And I think another 9.0 did sell. Let me check. But I don't think it was white pages. And so I think this one, I think of those 3, so of those 3, I believe this one is at least the nicer than one of the others. Yeah, so here we go. So in 2022, we had a 9.0 sell for $40,800. Yeah, and it was off-white to white. So here's another one where we can, we can look at these 2 next to each other. And so they're both pretty nice. I mean, this is a tough one. These ones are both pretty nice. The white pages might be a little bit brighter, just like a little bit brighter, but off-white to white versus white, I mean, that's pretty close. And so they're both very nice copies of this book. But it is top of census, tied for top of census. Now, this could have been an outlier. The tough part with this one is that this sold, almost 2 years ago. top of census book. Is there another person out there willing to spend 40,000? And so because I mean, when you look at like a 4.5, it's 2,600. I mean, this is an expensive book. It's usually kind of like a minimum. You're going to be spending about $1,000 on this book, but it really, really jumps when you get up to grades like this, because they just don't come up for sale hardly ever. I mean, look at an 8.5, not for 11 years. You had one 8.0 sale 2 years ago, and you had this 9.0. So I'm going to say 37,000, because I'm not going to be surprised if it goes down a little bit. I think 37,000, like this could be an outlier sale, but it is an exceptional copy. And so it's not like I'd be surprised if it ended up going for more. It's sitting at 22,800 right now. I'm going to say 37,000 for this Ghost Comics number 6. All right. Now the last book, and this is the one that I just wanted to talk about, because just to be a little cautious of, because there are sometimes things, you want to look out for. Sometimes it's worthwhile to check the graders' notes, that kind of thing. And that's this Witch's Tales number 25. Now, originally I was planning on talking about this book because this is such an incredible presenting copy. I mean, the colors are so deep on this one. Amazing color strike. This is another one of these big, well-known pre-code horror covers. It looks like it's done by Lee Elias, but it is not. But the thing about this one is, then I went, I saw this down here, and I was just like, I'm going to check the grader's notes. Like maybe the reason it's a 6.5 is it has, one detached staple. When you go and check the grader's notes, they've got them down here. It goes manufactured without top staple. So it only has one staple. Moderate wear, small light multiple crease, that kind of thing. But then staple detached bottom of back cover. So that means that this book only has 1 point of attachment. So what I'm talking about is that it means that this book is not attached to the back cover. It just has a little piece of paper under it on this one staple. There's nothing holding on up here. And so this, to me, this book might already be detached. It might be detached in this case. I don't even know. I mean, you can tell how it's kind of like pushed in some. It might still be, under that staple. I don't know. But if this is detached, the highest grade that I'm aware of that you can get with a fully detached cover is a 4.0. And so, at least from CGC, it's a 4.0. And so to me, this book could be a 4.0 book, but it's in a 6.5 case. And just because if something shifted it around, something, happened, it got, something wasn't handled real well, and that got detached in there, it could be a 4.0 book inside of a 6.5 case. So if we look at Witch's Tales number 25, and now the thing is, the pricing isn't all that different between a 4.0 and a 6.5 right now, at least. So you have a 4.0 that recently sold for 3,000, 3.5 for 2,800. I mean, it's a book it's not quite $1,000 a point. It's kind of like around 800, 750 per point for this book. 6.5 sold in July for 4,300. That feels like that was probably kind of a good price. I mean, that's still around 700 per point, but we're now, multiple grades higher, doesn't sell as often. You think maybe it would be going for a little more by here, maybe around, when you can see it had some higher sales. It had a 6,200. And I feel like it's probably more like a $5,500 to $6,000 book in a 6.5. But I would be very concerned that this book is fully detached inside that case. And so if it was me and I was pricing that book, or at least not necessarily pricing it, because you kind of got to price it, because I don't know. I got to say, like, the price is probably a $5,000 book, but I wouldn't want to personally pay more than around this number, around the $3,000 price point, because I would be so concerned that this one is fully detached. Now, I don't know if that's why this is still sitting down at 1,380. Maybe other people are feeling that same way. But once you get into that live auction, there might be a lot of people that are just coming in and they aren't looking at those types of details, and they see the number, they know what the pricing is for a 6.5, and they bid on it accordingly. And I wouldn't be surprised if this book ends up going for 5,000 or even a little bit more. But if you're watching this video and you're thinking about bidding on this book, just something to consider, that I would be very, very cautious around this one. But hope you enjoyed this video, saw some cool books, maybe, helped you make a decision on this one, maybe some of these other ones. These signature auctions, these platinum auctions are always fun to at least check out the books that are selling in them, see what types of crazy stuff is coming up for sale, what types of big numbers they hit. But if you would like to see more videos like this, if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, notification bell, all that kind of stuff. If you want to watch more of my videos, there's gonna be some, little images up here you can click on to watch those videos. Subscription button will be on the screen somewhere. Subscribe to the channel, really helps the channel, and I will see you on the next one.